Hello, teachers, and welcome to Teachers Help Teachers. I'm your host, Esther Yoon, and with me today is Lee Kessner. Hello, Lee. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Lee is a teacher. She's finishing up her 4th year of teaching. She is also finishing up her micro STEAM certification with LAUSD. She has a business degree she has a master's in business, and she has 2 grown children. And Lee, can you elaborate how your children influenced you, made you decide to go into teaching, please?
Yes. Well, when my children were little, I was very active in their school and I volunteered all over the place like so many parents do. And I saw so many great things at their school. I was like, oh, this is awesome that they do this and this is awesome that they do that. And then there were sometimes some things that I didn't love so much. And I thought to myself, how would I change this? What can I do? And so when the opportunity presented itself and the time was right that I was able to go back to school and earn my teaching credential, it was really with that thought in mind, how much I loved being in the school environment and what I loved about interacting with the students in my own children's classroom when they were little, and what I thought I would like to, even after all these years, carry forward some really amazing things, and then some of the things that are like, I want to be this kind of teacher and not that kind of teacher, and that was sort of what propelled me into this position right now, where I love this job more than I could imagine, to be perfectly honest with you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And I have to say, I know Lee. Not very well. We're both colleagues at the same school. She teaches upper grade while I teach primary. But I have to say, Lee, you've left quite an impression on me. You seem to be such a learner, a lifelong learner, and you've not only do you learn, but you position yourself to be a valuable asset to our school. You've brought on some programs for us. You've started some meaningful assemblies, like I remember in our Black History Month, where you brought together a multimedia presentation for all of us to be a part of. So I love that you're a learner, but you're also somebody who takes a vision and execute it. And you impress me, Lee. So thank you again for agreeing to be here and to talk to us about STEAM education.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm very excited to talk about STEAM. I love STEAM.
Thank you, Lee. So currently, like I mentioned, you are working on your STEAM certification, and you mentioned to me STEAM education in a previous conversation where we were talking about this episode. So tell us, what is STEAM education?
All right, so I prepared a slide, and I'm going to share my screen for a minute just so that you can see a visual, which I think is helpful. And so there are so many components to a STEAM education, and as you can see, this is a very cluttered slide because there's so many components and I could fit so much more on here. But STEAM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And one of the really cool things about STEAM, and it's evolving to this, is that they're going to start calling it STREAM. And the reason why is because they want to include the reading and writing.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the really cool thing about STEAM, and it goes hand in hand with sort of a growth mindset that STEAM represents is the fact that STEAM is going to be evolving to something called STREAM. And STREAM includes the R for reading and writing, which, while reading and writing is always a component of all of these things, now it has sort of equal value. And so it's, it'll be equally as weighted as anything else that comprises the acronym of STEAM. And so for us who love language arts, and I include myself in that, the R's in there really, I was very excited about that. And so, but what a STEAM education really is the intentional integration of curriculum. And so and it's curriculum across disciplines. And again, the key word to that is the intentionality of this integration. So it's on purpose having a lesson that not only embodies, for example, science, but it's also going to carry over to language arts, to art, to engineering. And I can give you an example of this. I did a lesson with my class that was actually an art lesson where they made a pop-up card, except it turned into a science lesson because we had to talk about the forces of push and pull as you make the levers. And it turned into a language arts lesson because they also had to create a poem that goes inside the pop-up card. And so this is really what we're talking about in the intentional integration of disciplines. So, and that would be a STEAM education. And it also involves growth mindset, a lot of collaboration, a lot of talking all over the place. So if you're a teacher who is used to your students just staring at you while you talk, it's kind of less you and more them. And so that's what it is.
Thank you. And for myself, I'm reading this this book called Visible Learning in Math. It's a series of visible learning, and there's a part there where it talks about several levels of learning. One of them being deep learning, where students plan, investigate, and elaborate their conceptual understandings, and then begin to make generalizations. So along with that, Lee, I imagine solutions to a problem, being able to, I would think that solutions to a problem, like as in engineering or what an engineer would do, right? Solving problems, the solutions would reveal itself, right? As students learn something at the deep level, right? And so how does that definition of deep learning, how is that related or relevant to STEAM education? How does that work?
In a STEAM education, it's all about deep learning, and it's deep learning through the student experiencing their learning, taking agency over their learning, as they're learning something that's relevant and important to them. So, and the teacher acting really as a facilitator, and rather than, again, standing in front of the classroom and kind of just giving facts and memorize these facts. This is about a student, it's sort of student guided learning where they get to, discuss a topic that they're excited about. What's difficult about that is finding that topic that they're excited about, and then having it, a lesson plan be created around the standards that you still know that you have to hit. Right. So you have to hit these standards, but you want to do it in a way that the students don't really know that that's what what's happening here. And so, because you want it to be interesting to them. And so when they find that they're learning about something that's interesting to them and something that they have a genuine stake in, which is generally, going to be a real world problem, something that they will be able to apply to their own lives. So it's something personal to them, and they get excited about it, and they want to persevere. And then when they persevere and they overcome hurdles and obstacles, it often takes them into another direction where one problem is solved and another problem arises. And so it's this very cyclical thing where it's kind of this never-ending journey of, now another problem presents itself, and it's sort of been born from a solution that you thought you had solved the previous problem to. And I'll give you a perfect example of something that happened in my class this year, which I did not think was going to happen, and it wound up happening. And it literally took us almost an entire grading period to get through. And just sort of on a whim, my class was talking about landfills and plastic in landfills. And we decided, one of my students actually said, yeah, we should stop using sporks at school. And I was like, we should stop using sporks at school, but how do you propose that we do that? And we sat there as a class for a little while, probably a good week, and we bounced these ideas back and forth. How are we going to make it so that this class doesn't use sporks this year? And what happens if we don't take a spork packet? How are we going to get napkins? How are we going to get straws? Do we need straws? And all of these questions started coming up, and we came up with a way. And so for the entire school year, our class never opened a spork packet. That was sort of our thing. We never opened a spork packet. And my class actually washed their cloth napkins every week and brought their reusable utensils back to school, where they were stored we had a whole system. We got this system. And along the way, we charted it. So we had math going on. We made graphs. We charted it. We talked about, again, landfills. We used technology to display what was going on. We talked about the math in our school. What would happen if all of the classes stopped using sporks? How many sporks is that? What if a spork costs 5 cents a spork? How much money would we save? And all of these were applicable to the standards of my grade. Yes. And so it culminated in this project that was a movie that my students then made a storyboard for. And so then we have the language arts component. And it kind of snowballed, and they all became so passionate about it. And all the while they're learning science, engineering, technology, math, and art. And language arts. And so it was that was my that sort of was my foray into this enormous STEAM project this year. And so that was just an example of how that happens.
And I mean, you mentioned all those major domains, right, or major subject areas, but within each subject, like reading and writing, I mean, you have to do a lot of research, right? And not just superficial research, but like going into multimedia, going into, help me out here, Lee, what kind of research?
Well, that's the intentionality of it. And so what you really have, there's two components here. One is flexibility, because in STEAM, those things happen. What becomes a little something that you just thought, okay, I'm just going to do a tiny little project. Let's see if my class doesn't use sports this year, whatever. And then it becomes something that your student is passionate about. And all of a sudden they care about the math that's involved. How much money are we going to save? What can we do with that money? And, and it becomes something that they've now internalized, and the teacher has really just become a facilitator.
Yeah.
Because the student has now learned, is involved in deep learning about these concepts that are somehow interwoven, but they don't really, they know it, but they're not, they're not verbalizing it, but they know it because they can take these things now out into the real world. These topics are not compartmentalized for them anymore, and they see the way math and science and technology can all be used to solve a problem that they, were so passionate about, and they took it in that direction. And I sort of just supported them in their, desire to go in that direction.
And I think even if the students don't realize all these disciplines are interwoven, and I think eventually, yeah, if they're critically thinking, they will, oh yeah, this science relates to the writing that I just did and the research, and this math relates to what we just the math that we just did in our STEAM project, relates to that. Like, I think an aware student would see it, but more importantly, the teacher, right? The
Mhm.
teacher has to realize the intentions, the learning intentions, as you mentioned earlier, that yes, what we're doing here is, it's not just something to do and that's meaningful, but it's meaningful how really attacking, meeting all of those standards that we have to cover in such an effective, efficient, and meaningful way for everybody, right? So
Right.
thank you for that.
Sure.
So does STEAM education, um, not does, but how does STEAM education provide universal access for our learners, especially that population, our special ed population, our ELD population, our gifted population, and then not only just those particular groups of students, but how does STEAM education address access and give access to all learners too, with different learning modalities? Will you share with us
Sure.
how it does that?
So, so I prepared this slide for you. I didn't make this drawing. This is a very common cartoon here, but it exemplifies STEAM and its ability to provide equity to students. And then I'll share with you just a few ways that this could happen. And but I found this really resonated with me, this picture, because what it shows you in the very top, on the top left hand picture, are these people who are standing on a box, and it's showing equality because they're all standing on a box of the same size. But you have the smaller person who still can't see over the fence, and the middle one is kind of, just about there, but not quite. And then you have the taller one who it's just, easy. I can see over that fence. And they're getting all the same thing, and you might think that's fair because they have the same size box. But then it goes to the next picture, and this picture is really powerful, and this exemplifies equity. Equity is actually when everyone gets what they need and not just the same thing. And so the smaller person needs more boxes to see over the fence. The middle one actually needs that box to see over the fence, and the taller one doesn't need a box at all. And so that's equity. And then it leads to liberation, where you actually see them, hey, I'm not just looking over a fence now, I'm actually at the game. I'm there, I can be there. And so STEAM has a similar philosophy about it, in that, yeah, we don't all need the same things, and everyone doesn't learn the same way, but we all need to arrive at the same place, and it has to happen in different ways for different people. And some people are more visual learners, and some people are, kinesthetic learners, and they have to move around, and others are auditory. And so STEAM provides that opportunity for everybody, because there's motion, and and there's so much talking. There's so much talking in STEAM, and collaboration, and this constant exchange of ideas. And so I'm going to move on to, whoops, if I can. See, this is going to happen because now my slide is stuck. All right. And so I'm going to move on to the next thing. That this was just one, these are actually two ways of showing how to engage students. And one of them is a Freyer model, and it's, pretty standard, except that it's great for people, especially EL students, and also students who perhaps, are struggling readers and things like that, because you can do it as a group. You don't have to, they're not necessarily worksheets that you hand out individually, but when you do it as a group and you discuss a vocabulary word, you provide definitions, you can provide a visual as you in the corner. It's kind of hard to see in the slide. You give examples, and then you give non-examples, which would be like opposites or something like that. And it really like paints a very clear picture of what academic vocabulary could mean for a student who might not get it just from reading in a book. And this is all done, in a collaborative fashion. You can do it in small groups, or you can do it as a whole class. And often, it provides for participation of students to, to say, well, I know what an example of it is, but can someone help me out with a non-example? Or I can't put it into words, but I can show you a picture of what I think that means. And then, of course, you have this think, pair, share graphic organizer that it's very similar, honestly, to like a sentence frame, in that it guides the students along to tell them, you're going to talk about it in this way. Make sure you're asking this kind of question. Restate what the person said, and so that everyone's got an understanding. And so there's that. But then when you talk about the different kinds of learners, so here is an example. This was a student actually in my class who did this. And so in STEAM, they told us, and I fully believe this to be true, that memory improves by 6 times when we add pictures to words. And so rather than, sitting there taking traditional notes, we were learning about waves. And I said that I asked my students, look, I don't want you to take notes. We're going to do sketch notes. I want no more than 1 or 2 words per picture. And, but I want you to draw pictures that mean something to you, but there has to be a connection to what we've learned. And so you can see, like, someone drew a dolphin, and they were talking about echolocation, because that, the dolphins use wavelength in the water to communicate. And here, there's someone up here that says less length is more energy, and they're showing like a short frequency wave. And they could really, they could go back and talk to this without looking at a book. They know what's on their picture, and they learn that, by doing something that was of interest to them and matching a picture with words. And now they can tell you all about waves, right? And normally, if you're just writing this stuff down in a science journal, I don't know about you, but that's not where my interest lies. So I probably would not retain a whole lot of this. And then I'm just going to show the next one. We call it a thin slide. And so this is for people who are really, tech savvy. And you don't even have to be tech savvy, because my class completed this as a group. And we were learning about alcohol in the brain. They could have no more than 5 words on a slide. And they had to get up and present. So here's their talking skill, their tech skill, and their science. And they had to get and only talk about this single slide with 5 words on it. And so they knew what they were talking about. And it's kind of amazing to see those things happen. But these are just ways that you can give access and equity to people based on their learning style, and just know that everyone learns differently.
Right. So Lee, let's get practical. What does STEAM education look like in today's classroom? It sounds like a drastic shift away from a traditional class. So, will you talk to us about implementing this practically?
Sure. Well, and I would just like to add that I am no expert in STEAM here, and so what STEAM looks like for different people are different things. And for myself, my goal would really be to have a complete integration of curriculum, and so that we have, science always going with language arts and math, and there's not that very strict time structure. But in reality, I know that we all have to post our times, and when we hold language arts and when we hold math up on our board and have a schedule. And so STEAM should really look like students are engaged in something that is driven by their interests, that is cross-curricular, and contains 2 or more disciplines. The class should be noisy, not crazy noisy, like, I can't hear myself thinking here, but there's motion going on, and there's, students are getting up and they're walking around and they're discovering things. And most importantly, mistakes are being made, and mistakes are considered a learning experience. And without them, they don't learn. And so they're encouraged, actually. Mistakes are encouraged, they're cherished. They're like, what did you learn from this, and what could we do differently, and how are you going to turn this around? And so opportunities to learn arrive from mistakes being made, and that's and sort of, if you combine all those things, you got a STEAM thing going, and so that's what it is.
And I have to just go back to what you shared earlier throughout this presentation of how you gave us some real examples of, one student wanted to think about research. What would it be like if we didn't use sporks? And that just coming from our student and then going with that. As the teacher, though, you have to, I would imagine, not imagine, but I know that as a teacher, though, you have to know your teaching standards. You have to know your content standards. You have to know all of this, right? To then take what they're so curious about and develop it, with all that in mind, with all those standards in mind, but also I could imagine you invite your students along, right? To
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, you ask a really good question, and then having a dialogue of where they want to take this, but then also guiding them, making sure that all of your main standards, especially, and all standards, right, in those subjects are being covered as they go through this STEAM journey, right, as a class. So it's a huge shift for teachers. It's a huge shift for leaders, I would say, too. So in the beginning of the year, when they ask us for our agenda, right, our typical day and schedule, that's hard to answer. That's hard to do as a STEAM teacher, but so then that paradigm shift needs to happen, I would say, from the top down, don't you think?
I agree. And I feel fortunate in that regard. At least this is my take on our school, is that we do have a principal who's supportive of doing things in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you can justify the reasons why,
Mm-hmm.
she's really supportive of that. And so I have not felt any pressure if she's ever come and visited my room when technically math is supposed to be happening, but it looks like we're doing engineering, because it is a STEAM school. And when you're doing engineering, you're probably also doing math. And so I think that she realizes that as well.
Yeah. So I think practically, you know, teachers, we need to know our content standards, our teaching standards, NGSS, all that, to integrate with intention, right?
Mhm.
All of these disciplines in a topic that our students are generating. Am I getting that
It,
correct?
it's pretty much that.
Okay.
It's intention. It's uh, integrating curriculum. It's student driven. It's growth mindset. It's it's based in evidence. It's all of that.
It is all of that, and I too am excited about being at a STEAM school and approaching education in that way. Lee Kessner, thank you so much for sharing STEAM education with us on Teachers Help Teachers. We'll see you again very soon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.